So I think right off the bat, when we look at the selection process, again, that's something that should be administered regardless of where you work in the NYPD or what agency you work for and you carry a gun. It should be equal. I think the selection process should be transparent and it should be equal. Like I said, how the hell was I randomly selected 8 times in a year? How was Mike 18 times in his career? How were all of you just randomly, and you know people that never were? How is that possible? It's not. It's impossible. Or the random thing they're using is highly flawed and nobody ever looked at it. And that's why they're not showing to you how these random selections are happening. So I think right on the face of it alone, you could see Eric Sanders' title, A Random Drug Test that was anything but that. And that's why we titled this episode Not So Random Drug Testing, because it's obviously not. Just on the face of that alone. I remember when this whole policy got taken down, and it was like, I remember being furious because immediately it came out that FDNY was no longer going to test for marijuana.
Yeah.
Right? And I was like, oh, so that's what you guys traded? You traded your integrity so that you could use marijuana? Like, that's what you celebrate? And they're like, we're not getting drug tested no more. I was like, oh, but the government could stick you with whatever you want. So you shouldn't get drug tested because you might not want to know what's in your body. I remember being furious and we put that out. And then quickly the city was trying to hush those. They're like, no, those are rumors. That's not true. But it is true. They don't drug test for marijuana. And I mean, I see a huge hypocrisy in all of it. It's like, wait, so it's okay for the average citizen to utilize these products that are being sold on New York City streets, that it's okay to utilize this. It's okay to market to our children. It's okay to do all these things, but it's not okay for cops. So maybe it's not okay. There's a rise in mental illness. There's a rise in homelessness. Anybody see a correlation here? Anybody might want to go back to that time, how we were faring, how the hospitals were faring, how many emergency room trips were happening for all this stuff. Anybody want to talk about that? While Eric Adams is celebrating how his city smells like a car that kids hotboxed a week ago and never opened the windows. Entire city smells disgusting. Celebrating it. Oh, I see everybody's utilizing the law. So I mean, to me, I see the huge hypocrisy in it. But again, I could understand. All right, you have a gun. You're held to a higher standard. But again, you look at New York City sheriffs, you look at the fire marshals, and there's a few other jobs where you're carrying a gun. You're a city employee, and guess what? They're not testing you for marijuana. So it's pretty safe to say that they're not worried about you utilizing marijuana. Right? If you're not being tested for it. So why the concern only for NYPD cops? Why is it arbitrary? Why is it capricious? Pat Donahue, he said the department lives to have a certain level of vagueness so they can have flexibility during disciplinary decision making. And I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And what that is, it's power. It's arbitrary and capricious. Again, like I stated here, I have friends who have failed random dull tests. They failed them. They got a lawyer. They fought against the decision. They had doctors come and testify on their behalf. They won the case. As of today, they're active members of the NYPD working. Not a blip on the radar. Some have been since promoted. Just based on that fact alone. Shouldn't the department have redone how they operate and how they drug test? Just on that fact alone. You drug tested someone, they pop positive, a court overturned your decision. Why is anyone still being subject to the scrutiny now? Why is anybody? Like, shouldn't you have found a different form of testing if your test was proved faulty in a court of law? Why for years? And it's not like it happened one time. It's happened multiple times in different generations over the course of years, but yet the same procedures are still in place.
Yeah, it was brought up from the beginning. You know, the hair testing was made department wide around 98, and around the same time there was an officer who was terminated for initially testing positive, and he was later rehired because when they went to retest the sample, it was proven a false positive. So there was issues even back then, and instead of finding alternative means, the job persisted with the same system. And I'm reading this article from 1998, and it's like, we tend to think sometimes that a lot of the problems of the job they exist now, but when I read this article, I'm like, geez, in a lot of ways, a lot of the nonsense still existed back then, before we even got on the job. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we're gonna keep touching back on here is how it's a union failure, and how what I don't understand is how this issue wasn't being litigated in court by the unions before Eric Sanders, and especially since the Boston PD, who used to use the same firm, Psychmedics, to do the testing. There were some officers in Boston who were terminated for the same issue, and they brought a case, and it went to the federal district court, and they won. And Boston no longer uses that firm. They no longer use that method. And this was back in 2022. So it's now been 3 years. Where were our unions in that time frame? Where were they since the 1990s, the late 90s, and where were they in that 3 years? Where in court testimony, that method of testing was disproven. So I think this goes back to the unions, John, and the continuous failures of the unions. And they even now, where's the press release? It's been when did Eric Sanders release this? The 18th of April? So it's almost been a week now. Where's the press release from any of the unions? Are any of the unions paying attention here? I mean, Eric Sanders has all the ammunition here to win in court. So why aren't you saying something? This case has already gone to court in Boston, and the cops won it. So what do you think is going to happen here?
Look what Mike Smith's saying here. 18-0 versus Dole, right? But you went to the Super Bowl, Mike. You went to the Super Bowl 18 times randomly. And guess what could have happened? You could have lost. Every time I never used drugs. I was scared to death of this job. Scared to death of it. I bought protein once. I found out there was like hemp in it. I'm like, oh, I can't take that. Giving away protein that I bought. I didn't take anything. Like I really didn't. I just started now. At 44, I started taking supplements. I started taking creatine. Like that's it. Like I started taking creatine. And I started taking magnesium. Other than that, I don't take anything else. But like the whole time on the job, I never took anything. And yet every time I went for adult, I was scared to death. I was like, what if I ate some? What if this? What if that? What if I shook this guy's hand? He had something on his hand. I don't know, like a million different things, because you literally go into the Super Bowl and the testing's flawed. And that there's people that might have an axe to grind with you. That somebody might want to see you get pop on a dole and get thrown off the job. They don't like you. They think your shit doesn't stink. They don't even know you. They never spoke to you. They just seen you from a distance and don't like you. A lot of jealousy in the New York City Police Department. A lot of jealousy from men who are out of shape, who never lifted a weight in their lives, who don't eat right, who drink every night, And they don't understand how a man who spends countless hours in the gym, diets, could have a physique like Mike Smith, like no donuts here. They don't understand how guys could actually, through consistency, persistence, hard work, dedication, they don't understand how you could look like that because they look like crap. So the fact that they look like crap, you should look like crap. Why am I not in shape? I don't know. Maybe because you eat like a fat slob every night and you don't work out and you avoid walking up the stairs at all costs. Like maybe the fact that you've never lifted a weight in your life has something to do with that. I don't know. Maybe the fact you were never athletic your entire life had something to do with that. You don't like to sweat. I don't know. Whatever it is, but there is jealousy that comes into play in these random dull tests. We see it a lot with guys with a muscular build. They're randomly dulled, and you're like, it's impossible that you're randomly dulled 18 times, and a guy who has the same identical last name to you was never dulled. And by the way, Smith, how common of a name is Smith in the New York City Police Department? How common of a name is that? There has to be a couple of other dudes with that name. Ask them how many times they've been dulled. Guess what? I guess they would just kept getting skipped over, and it just went right back to Mike. Like what I told earlier is when I was in IB my first year, I got dull tested 7 times. 7 times. I'm like, could you literally tell me at this point this is random? The 8th time, I was furious. I was like, let me just get this straight. The people that are in charge of doing these random dull tests, picking these numbers out, because IAB differs from the rest of the job. Vice OCCB used to have their own different dull testing as well. And what they would do is have whoever works for the chief just pick out who's going for the dull. So I'm like, that seems like a pretty flawed system to me, that I'm going to go my 8th time. Every time I got back from vacation, there was another girl in my office, and we used to joke. She would come back from vacation. I'm like, watch, you're going to get dulled. She's like, oh, did it come down yet? I said, no, but it's gonna. And every time, like clockwork, me and her went on vacation. Well, once we got back from vacation, boom, we got dulled. And so on my 8th time, I flipped out. Went to the chief's office. He's like, oh, hold on. Picks up the phone. He's like, yeah, we'll reschedule you. You don't have to go. I was like, oh, so if I was using drugs, I just played you and now it's good. And he's like, he just looks at me and I just walk out of the office and I'm like, this is ridiculous. I'm like, people in this bureau are probably using drugs and will never get dulled.
Yeah.
Never get dulled. Guess what happens? The girl that was picking out the random dulls retires. Somebody else comes in. I guess maybe they do it randomly. And guess what? Somebody pops positive for cocaine. Right? That was never dulled the whole time I was there. Well, I went 8 times and nobody else went any. And here I am like a weirdo. I look like I have tiger stripes on my leg because I'm not going to shave my whole leg. And you're walking around like a complete weirdo. Like your neighbors are looking at you like, dude, what's up with it? Why does this guy have shaving lines into his legs? Oh, my legs literally looked like I was shaving tiger stripes into them. And every time you go, it's hair and urine, because there's 2 types of dulls. There's sometimes you're going to show up and sometimes they're going to say, just pee in a cup. Or sometimes they're going to say, we're going to shave you and you're going to pee in a cup. But yet, all of these randoms that I ever went to, and I'm sure the same is going to be true for Mike Smith, they told you pee in a cup and then we're going to shave your leg. I'm positive. And even that, the odds on that, it's impossible.
Well, yeah, you should have been nervous because, 10%, between 5 and 10% of the testing tends to be false positives. And even so, like, there are certain drugs that even pop up as like either amphetamines or THC. Like if you take Xanax or even have a poppy seed bagel, which I actually thought was a myth, but turns out it's actually true. You could pop with a false positive by eating a poppy seed bagel or anything with like hemp seed or even vitamin B, But yeah, it's testing for the peasants. The closer you are to the top, it's again the rules don't matter to you.
It's like, how many times do you think Kaz Daughtry was dole tested in his career?
Yeah, right.
Jeffrey Madry.
Right.
How many times?
How many times do you think, even if it was random, in which case we don't know because they don't publish the algorithm to explain how exactly you get picked up. So even if he was picked up randomly, how many times do you think it was squashed by Madry? And Madry gave a phone call like, "No, not today. I need him. I need him to drive me to my side piece today."
I'm gonna say that maybe early on once, maybe, but if you got past that early on, never. 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 These people are hanging out in drug dens. They're hanging out in places that's known for sex trafficking. They're hanging out in places that's known for drug dealing.
Yeah.
And they're not getting dole tested. They're hanging out with known drug users. I mean, you're hanging out with all these celebrities hobnobbing like your Frank Sinatra or Dean Martin, the second coming of. Hanging out with rappers who are smoking marijuana, using a lot of other stuff that they shouldn't be using. Shouldn't they be ones getting tested? You're coming back from a Diddy party. You don't think those people should have been tested? No.
Yeah, hanging out in a place known for having a drug buffet, Well, Jimmy Rodriguez places in the past, But it's this whole disjointed process that's part of course for the NYPD, and it's you can take this process. This disjointedness applies to everything. It applies to the overtime. It applies to drug testing. It applies to disciplinary process. It applies to just about everything on this job.
You've just watched a clip from our live episode. Click the description to watch the full episode. Like, share, and subscribe for more videos just like this.